Welcome everybody to our webinar. Glad you could join us today. I'm Tim Runcie. I'm the CEO of Advisicon, and this is a fun topic for us to cover, but we're going to be talking about dusting off your strategic plan post-crisis event. Now, why would that be important for us to get into today? Well, as you know, I've been working not only as a CEO, but as a project practitioner and a teacher and an educator. And one of the things that we see that comes up quite commonly is the fact that crises happen. They happen all the time. And so what you have to be able to do is adapt, respond, but also in a sense go back to best practices. And that's one of the reasons we're going to talk about this today. Okay, let's take a look at our first set of information here. First off, we're going to get into kind of talking about strategic planning and in a VUCA or a crisis environment. So again, the idea is that a lot of things will happen. In many cases, who is actually steering the ship? Is it you? Is it the storm? Is it a mixture? Well, the idea is that we don't want to relinquish full control. And what you're going to find, and especially as you get older and older, as they say, get longer in the tooth, have more experience, is you're going to find that, crisis always happens. It's not something that, you always will say, oh, it's happening every week, every month. But you know what? It happens. It happens regularly. And there's things that you can't plan for. So as we dig in a little bit, we talk about that leadership component. Whether you're a program manager or a project manager, it's important for you to really be able to understand how you get in and make things happen. Now, Peter Drucker had a great quote, and I kind of refer to it quite often in the sense is that management is doing things right, and that's important. However, leadership is doing the right things. So as we think about strategic planning, this is important for us as we move through kind of this process, which is, hey, we have an idea, we've set targets and goals, and we're trying to move that direction. Something happens, changes everything. You're standing by the shore and suddenly a big sneaker wave, you're all wet, and now you have to do something different. Well, it's important to go back and say, listen, are we still doing the right things? What do we need to make sure that that happens? So as we move into kind of our second component here, I use the term VUCA, and this is a phraseology that not a lot of people have heard of, but it's actually taken hold over the years. And so life will happen while you're doing or planning something else. Very common. So the idea is that there's always a crisis. It's going to come in, whether you're on a project team or a key resources get pulled out, or perhaps your budget gets sandbagged, or maybe there's just the technology that you're using is just too risky, or you thought it would work and it didn't. But the idea is that you're going to have to be able to deal with these volatile, uncertainty, these complexity, and what we call ambiguity. And this information really came out. And so let's talk about that definition of VUCA, because I think this will help us. First of all, volatility. The idea that there's rapidly unexpected challenges, it's unstable, something has changed at a very quick rate. Perhaps you didn't actually have a good handle on what it was, or maybe you did, and then something kicked it into high gear, but you don't know how long it's going to last. So there's this volatility element that's important for you in strategic planning to say, you know what, those are the kind of things we try and plan around, but when they happen, we have to be able to adapt or adjust the ship so that we can continue to meet our mission. Certainly we talk about that whole uncertainty, right? The idea of unclear, or perhaps there's a pending change. We call them the known unknowns. We know that there's something coming, but we're uncertain about how big the impact is. And the idea is that, well, we know about it, we can kind of work towards it, but in strategic planning and getting back to getting your program or project fast-tracked is that sometimes we may not know how deep or how big that challenge is. So that uncertainty is something that we have to work through, but we can't throw everything out. We have to continue to make progress. And then, of course, that complexity, right? As you know, in a technical world, things can change very dramatically. So whether it's high-tech, low-tech, or there's a complex component, it's important for us to be able to really get back into an environment where we're able to say, hey, we can actually handle multiple challenges or a multifaceted effect that may be coming back and impacting. And so these influencers or conditions are things that we have to wrestle with. And then finally, in that VUCA term, V-U-C-A, the A stands for ambiguity. And the idea of that lack of clarity or predictability. So earlier on, we talked about the known unknowns. This ambiguity is the unknown unknowns. And the idea is there may be many of these. And so how do we wrestle through some of that? So the origins of VUCA, if you can think about where this may have come from, it actually came out of the U.S. Army War College. And the idea is that in combat, these type of scenarios are extremely common. So they're dealing with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, this ambiguous, multilateral world. Things are changing, and we have to be able to deal with that. And so the acronym was created kind of in the late 90s, but believe it or not, it was during September 11th or post-September 11, 2001 is where we talk about, hey, there's a big change. And so this really took hold as how do we manage some of these? Well, in strategic planning, as we start thinking about where we're going, the idea is that we're planning, but we don't necessarily have full clarity of all the pieces. When we move in, we want to take this strategic planning and saying, look, we were originally doing this macro plan. We may need to do a little tuning at a micro level. And the idea is that pulling in the information and saying, hey, listen, I want to lead from the front is super important because your resources, your team members, your leaders who are looking at you at delivering that project need to know that you can handle this and you can drive that forward. And it's important whether strategic planning is for just a single project that says, oh my gosh, things change. Let's huddle again in a micro sense doing strategic planning, to a macro sense that says, I'm running an international technology consulting organization. How do we deal with this crisis that's completely changed the way things work? And so the idea is that if we're trying to look at the antidotes to these VUCA crisis environment situations, is that volatility means that you need to double down on vision. If things are uncertain, you definitely need to create understanding with your team. And ultimately, if things are complex, then you need to drill to clarity so that we can actually counter some of the different pieces. And finally, of course, if it's ambiguous, well, we need to be agile to kind of adapt and adjust. And so while we may not do infinite planning, we'll have enough that says we can actually respond to that as we go forward. Now, in revisiting your strategic plan and leading through a crisis, this is important for people to go and say, well, listen, there's a lot of chaos out there. There's also opportunity. That silver lining exists, and I think that's important for us to really think about how to take advantage of this. I'm going to talk about some strategic levels that we're able to work from as we deal with these type of crises. So first of all, you got to restart your plan. Now, that doesn't mean you throw the whole plan out. The idea that we're assuming today is that your vision, your mission, and your values haven't changed. And if you want to take a look at some of our strategic planning, training, or consulting, this is really important because not only in growing a team, growing an organization, or growing a business, is that you want to bring the right people in and have them hyper-focusing, yep, this is why I'm here, this is what I do, and this is why I do it. And it's important to understand in doing it, these are the values that we actually bring to the table. But as you go forward, the idea is that when the dust is beginning to settle, you want to regroup and attack. So you want to restart that plan by revisiting and saying, yeah, vision, mission, and values, are we still in alignment? Is that still the case? Because perhaps the mission hasn't changed, but how you're going to execute may. And that means you'll need to not just do strategic planning, but really what we call strategic action planning. The idea is to quickly assess what initiatives are going on. And with that assessment, as we look through going, hey, listen, I need to get down to brass tacks, having that frank conversation, kind of that as-is assessment, or as I call it, the no BS assess. I want to know where the things are, what's working, what's not working. That's going to require trust. It's going to require honesty. It's going to have people who are aligned with that vision, mission, and values, but also you're going to need metrics. And these are key pieces that will help you restart and get these fast-tracked and back in place. So again, in this crisis, one of the things I find is that sometimes crises are a good thing. It allows you to do things that you've never been able to do before in a culture that is now ripe for change. So we talk about getting the human systems to change. Remember, human systems are people. The most complex computer system program on the planet is people. They have drama, they have family, they have systems of origin, they have education. There are so many different layers there. And these people bring this to the table, and you have to manage a team or manage a division or a department Well, guess what? If you want that system to change, sometimes the crisis provides you the opportunity to actually make hay when that sun shines. Now, as a kid, I don't know if you played this game, but I really enjoyed the red light, green light, where you'd have one person stand at the very front and they would say, red light, and they're looking for people moving. And if they see you, they'd send you back to the line. Then they'd turn their back and go green light. And they would kind of count, or they would randomly flip back around and go red light. And they're trying to catch people moving. And the goal was that everybody was trying to get as close as they could to touch basically the person who was turning around front and backwards. And the idea is that in a red light, green light environment, when it's green light, you want to move and move as quickly as possible, because when things suddenly come up or change and you say, okay, what's going on here? You're already in place. You're entrenched. You've actually been able to move the needle forward. You've implemented tools, processes, systems, and people understood why you're doing it. You just made the most out of that opportunity. So in that restarting of that strategic plan, or looking at what we call strategic action planning, the overall idea is that we need to realign, reassess what are the assets that we have, what are the resources, and then we need some mechanism for accountability. Which is interesting is, why weren't you doing this before, right? So if we talk about prioritization, aligning your assets to the resources, availability, the skill sets that you need, would have been great if you're doing before, but if you're not, here's a great opportunity to do so now. So as we continue looking at the values of strategic action planning, it's not doing the full strategic plan up top. It's really saying, let's now drill under the vision, mission, and values and say, hey, your team, your customers are looking for you to lead with direction. And the idea is that we want to align the business drivers to the things that are the strategic goals. And once we've revisited those, then we go back to what are we doing that's going to make that happen? Or what do we not do, and where do we put our energy into? And so that weighing, ranking, and reprioritization is important, as well as the ability to kill, defer, delay, or reallocate resources. This is truly, in a sense, strategic planning. Which is interesting is that you also do the same thing in a project manager, is that you may prioritize where people spend their time. If I'm looking at a sprint, I'm looking at what am I going to try and accomplish for this week? And I may need to put something on the backlog and come back to it if it's not producing value, because the idea is within a time period, we do need to deliver that value. Now, moving through here, the concepts that we have in a crisis are establishing future monitoring of threat and results. If you didn't have it before, it's a great opportunity to begin putting that in place. So as you begin thinking, hey, I need to have better visibility to perhaps the threats or the results of what we're doing to make sure that it actually works in this new environment, this is the way to do this, is that really looking at the technology, the tools, the systems, the process, and the communication channels are all something that should be taken a look at. And if you're weak in any one of those areas, it's a golden opportunity for you to jump in and make that happen. Now realize, again, what got you to where you're at today isn't going to take you to the next level, may be a very valid point. Because of the crisis or COVID or whatever's happened, the rules have changed, the tools have changed, the games have changed. It doesn't mean that your mission hasn't changed. And so as we begin looking at that, this adaptive component is important for you to set up within your project teams or your programs, your project management office, or even in your business. And I think it's important to sit down and say, how do we engineer that? But the idea of crisis, it will bring out the true character in people. You'll find people who will have a meltdown. And again, this is why it's important for you to take that strategic plan and go, all right, guys, this is the action plan that we're going to go do today. Let me galvanize everyone around us, and we need to move forward. And these metrics to say, are we producing results, allow you to quickly test the waters, come back and make adjustments. So while other organizations or people or projects are kind of scrambling and not sure what they're doing, you're moving forward with direction, which makes you stand out, makes you much more competitive. It also makes you in a place where you'll be able to take advantage of the new landscape as things surface. So in leading these key skill sets, and this is important, is that in order to help you grow, or the phraseology I like to leverage out of the TV show Naked and Afraid, which is like, hey, we're out in the lone, we're dropped off in the middle of nowhere, I've got no clothes and I have to survive for 21 days. People don't just want to survive, they want to thrive. So how do you take advantage? How do you get your team reorganized, and how do you move forward? It's important when things are volatile is that you have to be visionary. That means you need to go back to that vision that you had originally and go, if we're doing the vision casting, let's just quickly validate and tune that. That means we made sure that we're refining and resetting that vision, getting your team galvanized this. If any of you have ever been in a combat situation, which I have been in a combat situation, I will tell you, it's just like getting up on stage. All of a sudden, that stage fright is there. Things are changed. What you practiced comes into play. In many cases, you move into this automation. And it's important that as you begin to say, hey, crisis has happened, there's chaos everywhere, a good leader will galvanize their team, pull them back, and have them refocus on what they need to do. They may need to change the way that they're doing it, or perhaps what tools they're working with, but the overall idea is that the mission may still be intact. And so this is important for you as a leader in a project organization, or if you're just the project manager, or you're a programmer or a business owner, is that you want to be able to take that strategic plan, quickly dust it off, validate it, and then begin testing to say, are we still doing the right things? Are we getting the results that we're hoping for? So that idea of making lemons out of lemonade is important. And of course, as we move forward, you need to be understandable. That means if your vision or mission wasn't clear before, it needs to be doubly so today. And as a leader, you need to be constantly seeking to clarify, making sure that people understand, and also that you're engaged in a place that says whether you're leading from the front or you're delegating, not abdicating, meaning dumping on somebody, is that they need to know this is what it looks like when you're done successfully. This is what we need to do. And sometimes in that organization, you really need to be in a place where you are putting yourself in your customer's shoes. You may need to take a look at the way things are at and rethink the way that that approach is being done. So as you continue to think about be clear in the face of complexity, that means schedules, visibility, even if you only do a week at a time, which really renders well for sprints, right? The whole idea of a sprint is we're going to take a look at a list of things that we want to accomplish. We prioritize what we're doing in a week, and we do a retrospective to see how we did by that end of that week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on how long that sprint cycle is. But it's important for you to continue to leverage these pieces. And again, agile mindset. One of the hardest things that you're going to find in managing a project or a team is that we tend to take things very personal, right? The overall idea is as a business owner, as a business leader, is that you get very passionate, excited about something, and then when it doesn't happen, it's like somebody took away your whoopee. You're frustrated, you're upset, you want to blame people. Your reaction is, what do we do? Well, as you begin looking at what's happening here, if you have an agile mindset and you're saying, you know what, these VUCA things happen, and they happen pretty frequently, or they happen on a regular cadence, we need a mindset that just says, you know what, we can pivot. And the way I describe that is that for those of you who've gotten your PMP certification, your Project Management Professional certification, part of that, doctor's creed, which is do no harm for a project manager, is you won't lie, you won't cheat, you won't steal, and data is data, right? It's not good data, it's not bad data. It's just what it is. And if you can take the emotion out and look at what are you trying to accomplish, you can help eliminate that. It doesn't mean that you don't address the emotive state of your team, but the idea is that you want to get them back to, here's what we're trying to do, this is why we're doing it, and these are the new prioritization of projects, and here's what we're going to do and measure that those are successful. So some of the things I love to talk about are technology, and as you know, in order to change organizations, you need metrics. You need good data to say, is it actually working or not working? So as we think about the tools and models and other learning components that we have here, the overall idea is that we definitely want to make sure we put in place things that will help you. So first of all, if you are working with resources, you should have a common resource pool. Kind of like saying, I want to go to one place to make sure that all work assignments assigned to one person, regardless of where it's coming from, are registered, right? We always know what is that demand versus the capacity of my resource pool. Secondarily, as we go through, we have deliverables, and that means you're going to need some sort of time-phased engine, right? It's okay to have tasks where you're checking off the list, but the minute we have deliverables and dates, you're going to need something that has time. So scheduling technologies are great for this, right? The idea of simple schedules, complex schedules, we can get people to come in there and use the right tool that says I've got time-phased data. The other part that comes up very commonly is collaboration. Where are my documents? Where are the communications? In some cases, two separate things, but that collaboration of information, we need a place to put that. Microsoft Teams, Planner, Project, SharePoint, all interconnected with reports and dashboards are all some things that you can work with. And again, as we look at dusting off and getting our strategic action plan in place, you need to have a way to rank and rate what you're doing. It's almost like a risk prioritization level that says, should we keep doing this? Well, I need to validate that it's actually producing results. So these predictive analytics, or we talk about machine learning or artificial intelligence or simply schedule updates, are important for us to be working from and to with that plan. And remember, if you've had a grandiose plan and you need to pare that back down, implementing some of these pieces, even if your plan is smaller and you do smaller bite size, maybe we're not doing a biennium strategic plan, we're only doing a year, is going to help you be able to manage and measure and produce results. Once your team begins to execute on this, there's that change in behavior you can actually see and validate and move forward. And again, having that adaptive mindset that says we need to make adjustments as we go are super important. So we go from a roadmap to a schedule to reporting. And I think this is important for us to begin to say, you know what, our strategic action plans, or dusting off that whole strategic plan again, says, you know what, now's the time to say, I need to not just wait for the end of the month to get my metrics or the end of the quarter, as I may need to test it a lot sooner. I need to make sure that we're not wasting any time and we actually have the metrics to validate that we're getting through that information. So whether you're using Power BI or some other reporting tool, there's a lot of these out there. There's report packs. If you haven't got the report packs, send us an email. We'll point you where they're at. I think we're even going to have some videos on how to quickly set up some of the free tools that are out there. You'll be surprised at how much easier it is to begin pulling these pieces together. So finally, as we talk about in summary what we're doing, the idea of strategic planning post-crisis, is important. And you have to prepare yourself, your team, and your organization to thrive or to thrive through these things. And so in doing so, this is one of the best tools that a program project or even a portfolio business manager can do, is to establish those vision and priorities, to have people focused on the highest value first. And again, galvanize your teams in the overall envision, a mission, and the way that we're going to execute and what actually we're going to do helps to quickly get people unparalyzed and moving forward. Finally, in thinking through this, you want to have that agile mindset. And again, agile just means adaptive, right? We do short iterative loops, and those short iterative loops say, are we actually getting results? Today's day and age, marketing used to be you'd buy a big 4-page color ad, you'd buy a radio or TV spot, you'd have a big billboard, you'd spend lots of money. Now it doesn't work that way. We can test to see, hey, is this actually working? Are people clicking on our links? Things are different, and the idea is to use the tools available to validate that things are getting done. So that monitor, measure, and basically test the waters is going to be important. And again, constantly communicate clarity, right? Here's what we're wrestling with, here's how we're going to solve it, here's how I want you to communicate with me, this is what it means, and having that open door policy will be helpful. So again, the idea is give your team permission to communicate, to think and innovate, but in that dusting off that strategic plan and getting going, now is the time to do this. So if you're doing a budgeting cycle and looking at, do we have enough budget for this? We really want to make sure that we have that information. And so in terms of that all-important data, it's valid for you to be thinking about, hey, you know what? Don't wait, don't put this off. I met with a group of CEOs and they were talking about, you know what, maybe we should postpone this. I'm like, oh no, now's the time to really re-galvanize your team around delivering. And I think that's the part. So again, thank you today. Love coming in and sharing with you. I hope this was helpful for you. Reach out anytime to Advisicon, any one of my staff. It's kind of one version of truth here, so we want to plug you in. If you have more questions about that, again, let us know. Hopefully, again, you can take this and begin applying that, and we'll have other videos that will continue to build upon this. So again, thank you all. Have a great time and stay safe.